The old journal felt cold against my palm, its weight a reminder of the generations before me who had held it. The leather worn thin by time and secrets, each crease a testament to the stories it held. 16 years, the age when we could finally document the wailing ceremony. It was a milestone, a rite of passage that marked our transition into adulthood. A rite, they called it, but to me, it felt more like a heavy burden, a weight pressing down on my chest. More like a burden pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. My hand trembled, clutching the worn spine. The weight of responsibility was almost too much to bear. The first empty page mocked me, waiting for words I wasn't sure I could write. It was as if the journal itself was challenging me. Years of whispered stories, warnings hissed from parent to child crowded my thoughts. Don't look away, don't stop singing, and never, ever, listen. These were the rules we lived by. But how could I not listen? The curiosity was overwhelming, a force that pulled me towards the unknown. The cries that echoed through the valley every year were haunting, primal. They seemed to call out to something deep within me. They burrowed under my skin, making me crave understanding even as I dreaded it. The fear and fascination were intertwined, impossible to separate. The ceremony was always held on the eve of the harvest moon, when the veil between the living and the other was thinnest. The entire town gathered in the town square, a sea of faces illuminated by flickering torchlight. We wore white, a symbol of purity, of remembrance, or so they said. An old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, stood atop the makeshift platform. Her voice, surprisingly strong, cut through the hushed whispers. The wailing ceremony, she reminded us, was a sacred duty, a way to appease those lost to the valley's embrace. To forget, she warned, was to invite their wrath. My throat constricted as the first mournful notes escaped the woman's lips. It was a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, a sorrow that transcended time and space. Each note was a dagger, piercing through the fabric of the night, leaving an indelible mark on the soul. Soon the entire town joined in, a chorus of wails that rose like smoke into the night sky. It was as if the very air was thick with grief, a palpable entity that wrapped itself around us, binding us together in our shared lament. The sound was chilling, a lament that seemed to claw at the edges of my sanity. It was a haunting melody, one that echoed in the deepest recesses of the mind, stirring memories long buried and fears long forgotten. I opened my mouth, ready to add my voice to the chorus, to fulfill my duty, to silence the unease twisting in my gut. It was a ritual, a tradition passed down through generations, a way to keep the darkness at bay. But something held me back. A hesitation, a moment of doubt that rooted me to the spot. It was as if an invisible hand was holding my throat, preventing me from uttering a single note. A flicker of rebellion, a spark of curiosity that refused to be extinguished. It was a small, defiant flame that burned within me, questioning the very foundation of our beliefs. What if the stories were true? What if the legends we had dismissed as mere folklore held a grain of truth? What if our wails were not just a ritual but a call, a signal to something lurking in the shadows? What if the wails weren't just a ceremony but a beacon, calling something out of the darkness, a force, an entity that thrived on our sorrow, feeding on our collective grief? I couldn't bring myself to sing. The weight of my doubts was too heavy, the questions too pressing. I stood there, a silent observer, watching as the town poured its heart out into the night. Instead I stood silent, a lone discordant note in the symphony of sorrow. My silence was a rebellion, a refusal to conform, a statement that echoed louder than any wail. In that moment I realized that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The air grew colder, biting at my skin with an intensity that made me shiver uncontrollably. Each breath I took was visible, a frosty cloud that quickly dissipated into the surrounding chill. A thick fog rolled in, blanketing the town square in an eerie silence. The once familiar surroundings were now shrouded in a dense, impenetrable mist, transforming the town into an alien landscape. The wails seemed to warp and distort, echoing all around me. It was as if the fog itself was alive, carrying the sounds of despair and twisting them into something unrecognizable. Fear, sharp and cold, pricked at my skin. Every hair on my body stood on end and my heart pounded in my chest like a drumbeat of impending doom. I was alone in a sea of sound, adrift in a sea of blind obedience. The fog seemed to swallow everything, leaving me isolated and vulnerable. The fog pulsed, and through the swirling gray I saw them. Shadows, barely discernible, moving with a purpose that sent chills down my spine. Figures, tall and gaunt, their forms shifting in the mist. They seemed to glide rather than walk, their movements almost otherworldly. They moved with an unsettling grace, their empty eyes fixed on me. It was as if they could see into my very soul, judging and condemning me with their hollow gaze. My breath caught in my throat, panic surged through me, and I felt a desperate need to escape, but my legs refused to move. The stories, the warnings, they were all true, but why? Why had no one believed them? Why had they been dismissed as mere legends? Why was I the only one who could see them? The questions swirled in my mind as relentless as the fog that surrounded me. The figures moved closer, drawn to my silence, my fear. I wanted to scream, to run, to lose myself in the anonymity of the crowd, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a terror so profound it stole my voice. A single word escaped the figures, carried on the wind, a name, my name. The wails reached a fever pitch, the sound vibrating through my bones, and in that moment I understood. The wailing ceremony wasn't about appeasing the dead, it was about keeping them at bay, about masking those who could hear, who could see, and I, by refusing to sing, had just unmasked myself.